My name's Charlotte, and I used to believe silence was loyalty until my own mother gave my house to my fiancé behind my back, then told me to stop making trouble like I was a child. They smiled, planned a honeymoon, with the same hands that signed me out of my own future. So I made one change. Just one. Now TSA has questions. And my mom? She finally had to answer one. What do you do when the people who raised you erase you? Sunday mornings at my mother's house always smelled like vanilla, overcooked bacon, and something I could never name but always felt. A mix of lavender furniture polish and the perfume she's worn since I was 10. Lavonda didn't like anyone calling it her house. She preferred the family home. But we both knew what the deed said, or rather, what it didn't say. The porch hadn't changed since high school. Neither had the porch swing that creaked like a guilty conscience. I walked in without knocking. That was the rule. If you're family, you don't knock. But being family in her house was like being in a club with shifting membership. I never knew if I was still on the list. Darius was already at the table. His laugh filled the room like he paid the mortgage. My sister Trelane sat with her phone angled just right to capture the good side of her mimosa. "Look who finally made it," Lavonda said, not looking up. I smiled, tight, sat down at the end of the table like always. She slid a folded napkin across the table, white linen embroidered with a single gold letter, D. She placed it right in front of Darius. That napkin used to be mine. He picked it up like it belonged to him. Maybe it did now. The biscuits were dry, or maybe I just stopped noticing flavor when I realized the conversation had changed without me. "Oh, Darius helped me fix the back gate yesterday," Lavonda said. Strong hands on that one. "He's been such a help," Trelane chimed in, glancing my way. "Glad someone's finally taking care of you, Char." I opened my mouth, then closed it. Darius reached for the butter like he owned it. "It's nothing. You raised a good one. I'm just the lucky guy who gets her." Lavonda beamed. "You're more than lucky. You're chosen." I nodded like I agreed, like I didn't hear the way the word chosen stuck to the roof of my mouth like syrup gone sour. You ever sit at your own table and realize the chair's been reassigned? She talked about home improvements next. She always did when she felt proud. I was thinking maybe Darius can help manage some of the property stuff. Future planning. She didn't look at me, didn't say my name. I picked up my fork, slowly. "What about the deed to the house?" She paused, then waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. "It's all in order. Let's not make this a legal lunch, sweetheart." Sweetheart. I've learned that word is a shut-up pill wrapped in sugar. I smiled. Everyone else kept eating. My smile just sat there. No one noticed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something kept pushing at the back of my thoughts like a kid tapping your shoulder nonstop. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Chatham County property records. Took maybe 3 minutes to log in, another 2 to find the address, and then it hit me. Darius Marlowe, co-title holder. My name was nowhere. I blinked at the screen. Maybe it was an error. No, it wasn't. Lavonda had promised me I was maybe 24. Just got my job. She'd said, "This house will be yours someday, baby. It's your birthright. You've stayed. You've sacrificed." Guess it was only mine when there wasn't anyone else she believed in more. Next morning, I came downstairs with the printed property record in my hand. I had my script ready. She was making coffee. "Morning. Sleep okay?" I didn't answer. She turned and smiled. "You're just tired, honey. Don't overthink things. Don't make a big deal." I looked down at the paper, folded it in half, then folded it again. Didn't say a word. I tucked it into the pocket of my jeans and sat at the table. And so I didn't. I tucked it away. Just like everything else I wasn't supposed to ask about. After everyone left, I started clearing plates. I picked up the napkin with the gold D. I held it in my hand a little longer than I should have. It was soft, old linen. It used to have no initials. It was my grandmother's. Lavonda had it embroidered last month. I looked at it again. It wasn't a napkin. It was a label. It was a rebranding, a redirection, a declaration. It wasn't stitched for me. It was a symbol of who belonged now and who didn't. I folded it carefully, didn't toss it, didn't stuff it in the laundry, just opened the drawer, the one near the oven, and placed it right on top of the others. Some things aren't worth destroying, just exposing. From the kitchen, I could hear Lavonda and Darius laughing in the living room. Something about the wedding playlist. Something about a song they both liked. "They think I'm still folding napkins," I whispered. I walked upstairs, opened my laptop. "They think I'm still folding napkins. I'm actually folding a plan." The backyard was already full when I stepped out. Folding chairs, plastic tables covered in pastel tablecloths, glass pitchers of iced tea sweating in the heat. You'd think it was Easter, not just a Sunday lunch. Lavonda always made it feel like a sermon, even when there wasn't one. I scanned for a seat. There was one empty, right beside her. But before I could reach it, she motioned to Darius. "Let him sit close," she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "He's family now." So he did. Sat right down beside her like he'd been raised there. Nobody blinked. No one looked my way. I sat across from them. Quiet, smiling. Power moves in families don't always shout. Sometimes they just quietly rearrange the furniture. And just like that, the second chair at the head of the table, the one I used to fill, belonged to someone else. They laughed a lot, the kind of laugh people use when they want to prove something to the room. Lavonda leaned into Darius as she poured him another glass of tea, her hand brushing his just enough to make it feel personal. I watched the movement like I was watching a scene in a play I wasn't cast in. Trelane raised an eyebrow, fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Seems like Mom finally got herself a favorite child." Everyone chuckled. Darius laughed too, then nudged my elbow. "Don't worry, babe, I'll share custody." The table laughed louder. I didn't. I kept my face pleasant. That's what you do when everyone's eyes are on your reaction, not their own behavior. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't hurt. I was calculating. Midway through lunch, Lavonda started talking about future plans, like she was laying out the family blueprint. "I've been thinking," she said, wiping her mouth like she was about to deliver a prophecy. "Darius should help manage things, long term. He's practical. Charlotte's more creative." Someone across the table laughed. Another nodded. I felt my fork pause mid-air. I didn't put it down. I just kept it there, floating. Creative was her way of saying unreliable. Creative was what she called me when I didn't agree, when I had my own thoughts. She had said it like it was a compliment, but it was a demotion in real time. I looked at Darius. He didn't correct her. I smiled. That's what I've been trained to do. Smile when they hand you your own erasure dressed up in courtesy. I was being turned into a dependent in a suit I'd paid for myself. A week before this lunch, I was walking past a restaurant on Bay Street. It was late. I'd just come out of a client call, needed air. I looked in the window, and there they were, Lavonda and Darius. Just the two of them. They weren't flirting. That wasn't what stung. What stung was how comfortable they looked. How familiar. She passed him a folder. He opened it, nodded, then reached across the table and touched her hand. Just briefly. But it was real. Not romantic, strategic. I stood there on the sidewalk, invisible to my own blood. In chess, you don't always see the queen move, but you feel the consequences the moment she does. That night after the brunch, I waited for Darius to come home. He was late. Said he got caught up helping Lavonda fix the garage door. I didn't press, just nodded. "Do you think my mom trusts me?" I asked. He blinked. "What? Of course. I mean, she's just used to handling things. Maybe she doesn't know how to stop." It came out too smooth, like a speech he'd given before. I smiled. Didn't push. He kissed my forehead like I was a child who'd asked a question too big, and that was the moment I stopped asking. The second chair stayed at the table. The next day, it was still there, angled toward Lavonda's side, slightly closer to her than any other seat. She used it for guests, for delivery folks, for the pastor's wife, but not for me. That chair became a symbol of who got proximity, of who was trusted. I didn't touch it, didn't move it back to center. I just watched it, waited. Late one evening, I walked past that table again. The sun was down. The porch light flickered like it always had. I stopped, ran my hand over the back of the chair. the same wood grain I used to lean into. "It's just a chair, right?" I whispered. Then I looked toward the window, toward them. But so was the throne in every fallen kingdom. I was clearing out a drawer in my old bedroom when I found it. Lavonda had asked me to box up some things for donation. Things you've outgrown, baby. The room hadn't changed much. The smell of sun-dried curtains, the faint tang of old wood, and some long-settled dust. I found a stack of papers from church, my name misspelled on every bulletin, an old spelling bee ribbon, second place, a baseball cap too small for any grown head. I paused when I picked up a thick white envelope with no label. Something about the weight felt deliberate. I opened it. Inside was a photo, slightly faded, like someone had looked at it too often. Darius, standing next to Trelane. They weren't touching, but their shoulders leaned just enough to betray comfort. Trelane had that smile, the one I hadn't seen on her face in years. Not around me, anyway. I flipped the photo over. A handwritten date. 5 years before I met Darius. I stared at it for a long time. Not from jealousy. I wasn't shocked he knew her. I was shocked no one had thought I deserved to know. There was a moment, months back, when I had asked Trelane if she thought Darius was the right one. She'd smiled, a tired smile, but not a cruel one. "He chose you. Don't overthink it." I'd carried that line around like a comfort blanket. Today, it sounded like a warning. I tucked the photo into the sleeve of a worn book and sat on the bed I used to cry in when no one could hear me. My hand rested on the frame of the mattress. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I thought. And thinking hurt more than any argument could have. There was another memory waiting in that room. One I'd buried deeper than the others. When I was 17, I got a full scholarship to a school in Atlanta. It was a big deal. No one in our family had ever gone out of state. I had dreams of graphic design, art history, whatever would let me build something that was mine. Lavonda sat me down with a cup of tea and that smile. "Baby," she said, "Trelane didn't get any offers, and she might not get another chance. She needs this more. You'll get another shot. You're the strong one." So I deferred. 1 year, then another. I watched my friend pack for college while I unpacked my own bags. That night, I stared at the ceiling and listened to Lavonda laugh on the phone with her sister, celebrating Trelane's big moment. "You do what's best for the family," she had told me. "That's what good daughters do." And I was a good daughter, so good that I let them write my future in pencil and erase it when they needed room. Later that week, I called Shannon, an old friend from high school who still lived nearby. She worked at the same coffee shop we used to hang out at after school. She remembered the scholarship, the whole thing. "You were crushed," she said. "But Lavonda threw a party for Trelane like it was her birthday." I leaned back in the chair. "Every time I handed something over," I said slowly, "someone else clapped for it. It wasn't a pattern anymore. It was a strategy, a system. Lavonda didn't just forget me. She knew exactly where to put me, where I wouldn't be heard. And Darius? He fit in not because he loved me, but because he learned how to navigate her kingdom faster than I ever did. I wasn't unlucky. I was managed. Every time I didn't speak up, it wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because someone else already filled in my words for me. Lavonda used to tell people, "Charlotte's my rock. She's the one I can always count on." "You'll bounce back," she'd say. "You always do." That wasn't pride. That was a license. A pass to break me and expect me to rebuild myself quietly. I sat on the floor with the photo beside me, notebook open in my lap. I started drawing lines, not literal ones, mental ones. Between every time I disappeared, and someone else appeared in my place, between every time Lavonda called me dependable, and someone else was handed the keys, I wasn't imagining it. I was just late to notice. I didn't burn the photo, didn't rip it, didn't frame it. I slid it back into the envelope, sealed it shut, and wrote one sentence across the back in black ink. The day I stopped forgetting myself. Then I lifted the mattress on that old bed and placed it underneath. Not hidden, but not on display either. I wasn't here to burn the house down, but I was counting the matches. On the way out, I paused by the family photo wall in the hallway. Trelane's picture, front and center. Lavonda, perfectly lit in every frame. Mine? Tucked behind a lamp, a corner visible if you stood close enough. She was smiling, I whispered. I was erasing myself. Not anymore. Lavonda was out getting her hair done when I sat down at her desk. I told her I needed a quiet place to finish some remote work, and she didn't ask twice. She trusted me enough not to snoop. That was her mistake. The cabinet didn't even creak when I pulled it open. Top drawer, yellow folder, labeled with my name in pen. I smiled. Of course, inside was a document I knew well. A property agreement she'd once claimed I'd be part of when the time came. My name had been on the earlier version, not at the top, but there. I remembered. This one was different. Lavonda's signature, Darris's too. My name wasn't even in the footnotes. My absence wasn't a clerical error. It was notarized. I went upstairs and dug out the older copy, found it tucked between receipts and old tax letters in a folder marked House Stuff. There it was, my name, plain as day, listed as a successor owner. A temporary placeholder, she'd once said, until we figure out the legal side. This wasn't a mistake. It was an edit, a permanent one. Mr. Grantham arrived an hour later, holding a manila envelope under his arm. He didn't expect me. That much was obvious. "Charlotte," he said, "didn't know you were here." "I work remote now," I smiled. "Lot of flexibility." He placed the papers on the desk and paused. "I was just looking through the new agreement," I said gently. "Noticed some changes." He shifted. "Your mother made it clear it was a family consensus." Consensus? There had been no meeting, no call, no vote, just a pen. I hadn't been edited out, I whispered after he left. I had been deliberately erased. Years ago, I helped organize a fundraiser for Lavonda's church, spent weeks planning the layout, designing the invites, calling sponsors. That night, standing in the back with my clipboard, I watched Lavonda take the mic. She smiled that perfect, practiced smile. "Charlotte does the hard part," she said, voice sweet as syrup. "I just smile." The room laughed, clapped, and I laughed too, because that's what you do when they hand your work to someone else and call it family pride. Now I replay that moment differently. It wasn't praise, it was packaging. "Endurance," Lavonda once said, "is what I love most about you." Endurance was what made me easy to forget. Lavonda came home just before noon. We had lunch in silence. Her eyes scanned her phone. Mine watched her fork. "You've always been the backbone of this family," she said at one point, almost offhand. I smiled. Small, tight. "Bones break too." She looked up for a second, but said nothing. Then changed the subject to flowers for the wedding. The war had begun. Only one side knew it. I left the house later that afternoon and walked to the town library. Sat in the far corner, the legal section. I pulled out 2 books on property succession and started reading slowly. Not because I didn't understand, because I wanted to. I didn't highlight anything. Just read. One sentence caught me. "Title modification without disclosure may constitute constructive fraud." I whispered it to myself 3 times. People say silence is grace, but silence can also be the mask you wear while they pick your pocket. I wasn't quiet because I was noble. I was quiet because I was trained to believe that asking questions meant disloyalty. I stopped begging to be written in. I started drafting my own script. It was around 10 when I came back home. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Darris had left his tablet on the island, face up, unlocked. I don't believe in signs, but I believe in patterns. I tapped the screen. An email chain was open. Subject: final document submitted. She's still playing along. From Darris to Lavonda. No emotion, no deception, just fact. I screenshotted it, sent it to myself, logged out, turned the screen off, didn't flinch, didn't think, just added one more line to a mental folder labeled Evidence. I passed the file cabinet on the way to my room, paused. "She called me the backbone," I whispered, tracing my finger along the drawer. "I'm about to show her what happens when the spine walks away." The soup tasted like water, not because she forgot the salt, but because we'd all forgotten how to speak. Lavonda called it her signature recipe, though it hadn't changed since I was a child. She ladled it into our bowls with that same stiff smile she used for church ladies and tax assessors. Trelane was deep into wedding logistics. Centerpieces, the seating chart, bridesmaid dresses, all of it delivered like she was directing a stage play. Darius leaned back in his chair, legs stretched, holding his glass like he owned the table. I was just background. When people stay silent long enough, even their food starts to lose flavor. I smiled, just like they needed me to. But something inside me wasn't playing along anymore. Something inside was folding in on itself. Lavonda wiped her mouth with her napkin and set it down like she was about to start a meeting. I invited Pastor Franklin over next week for a blessing, she said. A pre-wedding prayer circle, Trelane added. Cute, right? Darius chuckled. We're almost locked in on the honeymoon, by the way. Island weather, can't wait. I set my spoon down, not hard, not loud, just enough to hear it settle. Maybe we should slow down a bit, I said. Lavonda looked up. Her eyes sharpened. Stop stirring things up, she snapped. Just go ahead and get married. Just go ahead, like I was stalling for fun, like I hadn't swallowed every hesitation for the sake of this family's image. The room froze. Even Trelane shut up. I nodded once, excused myself. Not because I was about to cry, but because I wasn't sure what I'd say if I didn't walk away first. Back in my room, I picked up Darius's iPad, the one synced to his email and calendar. He used it for planning the trip, so I figured I'd check the dates, see what he'd confirmed. That's when I saw it, a notification. He forgot to sign out of a thread labeled Legal Logistics. I tapped it open. The subject line read, "After the trip, if she doesn't sign, we can go forward anyway." I scrolled. Darius was messaging someone named TG. They were talking about me, about contracts, about loopholes. This marriage makes everything legal. Afterward, leaving will be easier. That was the line that stuck. Afterward, leaving will be easier. I didn't panic, didn't break. I screenshotted the thread, saved it, named the folder Closure. Then I closed the device and set it aside, gently, like it was made of glass. Because I finally understood what was breaking. And it wasn't me. When I was 14, I heard Lavonda say something to her friend across the living room. Charlotte's easy. She never fights me. She said it with pride. I remember feeling proud, too, like I was the good one, the dependable daughter. Now I see it for what it was. Permission. They didn't choose me because I was strong. They chose me because I didn't say no. Every time I gave in, they clapped for it. Every time I bit my tongue, they handed me a ribbon and called it grace. That's not love, that's grooming. And I'd been loyal to it my whole life. I came back down before dinner was over. They were still laughing, still talking about wedding favors and honeymoon packages. I smiled, sat down, joined in. Darius made a dumb joke about matching swimsuits. I laughed. Too loud. My hands were shaking under the table. My jaw was tight. Lavonda looked at me like she used to when I was 5. That's better, she said. I like when you're like this. I stared at her. She thought I was back. Truth is, I'd already left. I don't remember the rest of that meal. Just that I smiled through all of it, like a mannequin. Like someone who'd accepted the costume they were handed and decided to wear it one last time. I wasn't at the edge of a breakdown. I was at the edge of something else. And I was holding steady. That night, I sat out on the porch with an old notebook. The pages were thin and curled at the edges. I flipped to a blank one, wrote slowly. My kindness was never consent. Then I wrote a date. Not the wedding, the departure. I'd walk through the ceremony, let them think they'd won. But I wasn't marrying him. I was burying what they thought I'd always be. I wasn't going to scream or rage or collapse, but I would never belong to them again. I got up from the porch when the breeze picked up, walked inside. The kitchen was still warm with the smell of leftover soup. I picked up my bowl, walked to the sink, emptied it. The soup wasn't bland. I just stopped tasting what was never real. I opened the drawer like I'd done 1,000 times before. But this time, I wasn't looking for keys or stamps or receipts. I was looking for confirmation. There it was, tucked under a stack of brochures from cruise lines and vacation rentals, a slim manila envelope. Inside, a plane ticket. It looked identical to the real itinerary. Name spelled right. Departure time matched. Airline logo clean. But the destination? Completely fake. They wouldn't know until they were at the gate. I ran my finger across the edge of the boarding pass. The difference between obedience and freedom, I whispered, sometimes fits on a slip of paper. I didn't feel joy. I felt precision. I played my role for a few more days, helped confirm RSVP counts, replied to group messages with thumbs-up emojis, smiled through every mention of wedding week. Lavonda had asked me to handle guest seating. I nodded, printed the list, and tucked it away. She handed me a planner. Just don't mix up the rehearsal dinner with the send-off brunch. I smiled at her. Of course not. In my phone, I kept a different checklist, one she'd never see. Receipts, backups, print run. Maddie's name was written next to clearance. We hadn't spoken in months, but she'd always told me, if you ever need me, I'll be around. She was around. We met under the guise of drinks, a midweek catch-up between old friends. She didn't ask questions until I was ready to talk. That's why I trusted her. The coffee shop was dim. No music playing, just the sound of cups clinking and chairs creaking when someone shifted too hard. Maddie slid into the seat across from me, pulled her sleeves up like she was bracing herself. You look tired, she said. Feels honest, I replied. She waited. I need help flagging a ticket, I told her. Her brow lifted, but she didn't speak. I want it to look real, scan like normal, but I want it to trigger a delay at TSA, nothing illegal. Just enough to give them pause. Maddie leaned back in her chair, exhaled slowly. You're not doing this to hurt them, she said. You're doing this to stop hurting yourself. I stared at my hands. I just want the lies to go where they belong. Grounded. She gave one small nod. We worked out the details in hushed tones. A soft flag was what she called it. Not arrest level, not even enough for a report, but enough to stop someone's day, long enough for someone to feel inconvenience in the way I'd felt erasure. We hugged outside and she said, text me when it's done, not before. I walked away without looking back. When I got home, the lights were low. Darius was on the couch, flipping through sports. Lavonda's door was closed. I moved quietly through the kitchen, took the real tickets out of her travel wallet, slid the altered ones in their place, checked the zip, checked it again. The printer worked flawlessly. So did the format. I'd tested every barcode. Then I sat at the dining table, the real itinerary in one hand, the fake one already swapped. I wrote a line to myself on the back of a sticky note. If I lose this moment, I go back to a life written by other people. Darius never looked up from the TV. Lavonda never came out. I looked around the room and thought, this isn't war, it's correction. Next morning, Lavonda was buzzing with excitement. Don't forget to print those thank you cards, she said, tossing her bag on the counter. Darius gave me a half smile. Thanks for keeping things smooth, babe. I returned the smile, but mine was sharper. I thought, I'm not keeping things smooth. I'm redirecting the turbulence. That afternoon, I prepared a second envelope, not with forged data, not with trickery, just a blank ticket. No destination, no name. I placed it inside with a note that read, this seat is yours if you still believe in who I really am. I didn't mail it, didn't seal it. I placed it on Lavonda's desk, on top of her neat stack of bridal catalogs. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was an option, a single silent question. And if she didn't answer it, that was still an answer. Later that evening, I watched from the hallway as they finalized their bags. New luggage, matching tags, 2 passports zipped away. They smiled at each other, wrapped in the glow of future plans. They packed for paradise, I murmured. I packed for truth. They were out front by 7. Lavonda in her pressed travel pantsuit, Darius hauling 2 brand-new matching suitcases. I stood behind the curtain upstairs, watching the morning light hit the hood of the cab they called. It should have hurt more, watching them head off to paradise, but funny thing about freedom, it doesn't come with fireworks. No applause, just silence that no longer cuts. I grabbed my keys, not to follow, but to finish what I started. While they left for the airport, I drove separately. Different car, different lot, different terminal. They wouldn't see me, but I'd see everything. The airport was already humming by the time I settled into my seat, far enough not to be obvious, close enough to witness. Lavonda and Darius breezed through bag check like regulars. She carried herself like a senator's wife. Darius nodded at a TSA agent like he'd built the place. They didn't notice when one officer leaned into another, a gesture, a nod. Lavonda was called first. She looked back at Darius, then smiled politely at the agent, stepped aside with the grace of a woman who thinks nothing bad happens to her. Darius went next. His charm cracked a little when they asked him to open his carry-on. He started talking. Fast. Too fast. Hand gestures, fake smiles, eyes darting. From my seat, I didn't gloat. I just watched, like you'd watch the tide pull something back out to sea. This wasn't punishment. This was alignment. It wasn't the bag that did it. Not really. It was the ticket. The one I altered, just enough to trip a system. Maddie's flag worked. Not arrest-worthy, just suspicion-worthy. Lavonda's ticket had data inconsistencies. A mismatch in reservation codes. Nothing illegal, just irregular, just enough to stain their morning. They were led to a side room, not cuffed, not screamed at, just gently redirected. Lavonda's face didn't fall, not all at once. But her hand shook slightly when she passed over her ID again. 20 minutes. That's how long they were held. I checked the gate screen. Flight delayed. Security clearance hold. I sat with my coffee and watched that delay flicker, and I thought, they've lived their lives untouched by consequence. Today, they were merely inconvenienced. And for people like them, that's chaos. I walked through Terminal B like I had nowhere to be. Coffee in hand, coat slung over one arm. I passed couples, solo travelers, moms juggling kids and bags. No one looked at me twice. A woman next to me at the cafe counter glanced toward gate 14. Must be awful, she said. Getting pulled aside like that. I shrugged. Sometimes getting stopped is exactly what you need. She blinked. Didn't respond. I didn't explain. Didn't film it. Didn't post. Didn't text anyone. I just existed. For once, not to be seen, but to see. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't rehearsing my pain in case someone asked about it. I was just drinking my coffee. The news pinged my phone around 2 p.m. Local segment. Small station. Not breaking news. Just the kind of midday filler you'd hear in waiting rooms. Travel delay due to flagged IDs at Savannah International, the anchor said. Footage played. It was them. Blurry, but them. TSA walking them down a side hallway. Slow and calm. The anchor smiled. Sources say it was a clerical flag, but the investigation is ongoing. I stared at the screen. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt validation. I didn't need them to admit they were wrong. I just needed the world to pause long enough to notice. My phone rang. Lavonda. I let it go. Then Darius. Declined it too. No voicemails. No texts. Just silence from people who'd always filled rooms with noise and control. I messaged Maddie. They're not flying today. Her reply came back with a single emoji. A green check mark. I smiled. Then I placed the phone face down, opened my laptop, and clicked a blank document. Time to write my terms. I sat at the kitchen table, late that night. Just me and a glass of water. Underneath the glass was that napkin, the one with the gold-stitched D. Lavonda's monogrammed declaration. I didn't move it, didn't tear it, just rested the base of my glass right in the center of the letter. And I whispered, I didn't need to be loud, I just needed the room to get quiet. She didn't look at me when she started speaking. Her voice came from across the table, cutting through the quiet, like someone who still believed she held the upper hand. Lavonda's words weren't shaken. They were measured, like someone rehearsing a speech that started the moment I left the airport. You humiliated me, Charlotte. Do you have any idea what people are saying? I sat still, didn't blink, didn't nod. She didn't say she was ashamed for what they'd done, just that someone had finally seen it. That's what stung. That's what confirmed it. She wasn't grieving the truth. She was grieving the exposure. Lavanda's pacing didn't stop, even as she threw questions at the walls. Do you think this makes you stronger, playing games with airport security? You don't win a family by embarrassing it. Darris stepped in, arms crossed. This is going too far now. Don't you think? I looked at him, not as the man I was supposed to marry, but as a man who'd mistaken access for power. No, I said. What you call too far, I call overdue. Then I placed the folder on the table. They didn't reach for it. They waited for me to explain. I didn't. Inside was my version of the contract. A legal claim, signatures, notarized forms, references to previous agreements, emails, the screenshots, the message that said, she's still playing along. I wasn't asking to be included. I was documenting that I had always belonged. I was 24 when Lavanda told me the house would be mine someday. Just not yet. It's yours, she'd said. I just don't want your name on it. People judge women for owning too much on their own. It'll make you look difficult. I was proud. I believed her. I believed I was being protected. Years passed. Trelane married, left town. I stayed, took care of the lawn, painted the trim, paid for new windows. The deed never changed. She used my silence like drywall, covered the structure of her image with it, built a castle using my patience as foundation. It was never about the paperwork. It was about the quiet she depended on to keep her crown. 2 days later, I met the family attorney on my own. He didn't flinch when he saw me walk in. He just adjusted his glasses, pulled out a blank form, and waited. I placed the folder down. The same one Lavanda refused to touch, laid it flat across his desk. There were no theatrics, just facts. Can this hold? I asked. He skimmed the documents, took his time, nodded once. This will hold. You did your homework. I didn't smile, didn't celebrate. I signed the last page and said, I didn't take anything from them. I just took back what they assumed I'd forget. This wasn't revenge, it was restitution. That evening, the house was still quiet. Lavanda's luggage sat near the stairs, unopened. I placed another envelope in the side pocket. This one wasn't legal. It wasn't a contract. Inside was a plane ticket, the one I'd printed with no name, and a note. If you still believe I'm worth walking beside, fill in your name and come. I didn't tape the envelope shut, didn't write Mom on the front. This wasn't an invitation. It was a threshold, and she'd have to cross it on her own terms. I sat in the kitchen, waiting, tea steeping in a chipped mug, my phone turned face down. Lavanda entered just after 9. Her steps were slower than usual. She saw the envelope immediately, picked it up, didn't open it. She placed it on the counter and sat across from me. We didn't speak. No one asked for clarification. For once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it grow, let it stretch across the space like truth finally catching its breath. I used to chase her gaze like it held my reflection. Now I stared forward, steady. My hands rested on a copy of the signed contract. I folded it once, tucked it into my bag. I gave her a chance to walk with me, I whispered. The rest is hers to carry. The room smelled like old wood and cheap punch. Folding chairs scraped against the tile as people settled into their seats, the hum of small talk echoing just loud enough to feel like background music. It was a civic luncheon, Savannah's version of honoring the quiet hands that held the community together. Lavanda and Darris were nowhere to be found. I noticed the difference in the air before I even reached the table. A woman I hadn't seen in years smiled, touched my arm. So glad you're here, Charlotte. You deserve this. There was a banner above the podium that read, Honoring Silent Pillars. And for the first time in my life, someone had called me something. And I didn't feel erased by it. It didn't take long before someone brought it up. A speaker paused mid-sentence, adjusting her mic, then turned her head slightly toward the table where I sat. I'm not sure if she's here, but I think we all remember that airport moment, she said with a small laugh. I mean, come on, that clip made the rounds, didn't it? People chuckled softly. A woman beside me leaned in and whispered, You were traveling with them, right? I turned to her. calm, solid. No, I said. I was traveling alone. Her mouth opened, just slightly, like she wanted to say more, but instead, she nodded. That's what I figured. No more was said. But I knew. In that breath of silence, my story was no longer theirs to twist. It was mine. There was a table in the center of the room, 8 name cards lined across white linen. All assigned except one, just a blank slot, napkin folded in the shape of a small triangle. I walked over slowly. The card with my name sat 2 chairs down. I picked it up, looked at the blank one. A gold D, stitched into the napkin, sat waiting. I didn't flinch. I switched the cards, sat right where the napkin was. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. I didn't need to prove I belonged anymore. I just needed to sit where they never expected me to. There are a lot of things I'll never do again. I won't beg for apologies. I won't retell my pain like it's a subscription someone forgot to renew. I won't walk back into a house where my name was used as a placeholder and nothing more. But I will move forward. I'll build my life with no one's blessing but my own. I'll let silence speak for itself, especially to those who never listened when I was still whispering. Justice doesn't always arrive with court dates and handcuffs. Sometimes it comes when you stop needing a ruling. I remember being 8. There was yelling in the kitchen, Lavonda and Trelane shouting about something I never understood. I'd crawled under the table with a coloring book and a red crayon that barely worked. She doesn't need to know everything, Lavonda had said. She's just a child. I wasn't crying. I was listening. And now? Now that child is the one writing the ending. Not for revenge. Not for validation, but because sometimes walking away means you finally outgrow the room they tried to keep you small in. Later that day, I went back to my new apartment. It was still quiet, still mine. I unpacked a few things I'd left boxed, my laptop, an old journal, the unsigned plane ticket. I placed it in a black shadow box on a shelf in the corner. Underneath it, I slid a small strip of paper with 5 words. What could have been, if they had chosen better. I didn't cry. I smiled, not to feel good, but to feel done. I didn't win against them. I won back myself. That evening, I walked by the river. Light wind, just enough to mess your hair if you didn't pin it right. My shoes scraped against the brick walkway. I didn't look behind me, only forward. The best part about walking away isn't the silence they're left with, it's the echo of your own voice, finally loud enough, just for you. The story doesn't end here. It just stops asking for a rewrite.